From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday, May 12th, 2021. James Azar here with the Practitioner Brief. Good morning to Matt Lee, who's joining us here on LinkedIn. I want to start off by, first of all, Patch Tuesday recap today. A lot of stuff going on. Germany halts Facebook sharing WhatsApp new kind of policy that I spoke about earlier this week. And the U.S. intel agencies start to warn about the reliability and security of 5G network, stuff that we've known about for a very, very long time. We are live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Thank you all so much for tuning in to today's show. Please make sure to subscribe to our show. Good morning to LinkedIn user. If you're listening on your favorite podcast listening platform, please subscribe. Give us a 5-star review. You can catch us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Play. Good morning to the awesome JJ, who actually spoke at an event yesterday in Australia, and I can't wait to hear how she did it. That was actually in person. Good morning to Argani Uzana. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to you as well. Folks, before we get into today's news, first of all, our show is brought to you by our friends over at Know Before, Wistic, and Ativo Networks. Make sure to check them out. You can see more about them in the show notes and support them as well. I do want to say one thing before we get started today, and I do my ceremonial coffee sip. Breaking news. Israel, just an hour ago, took out the head of the cyber unit for Hamas. Direct assassination of the head of the cyber unit for Hamas. Again, how does that impact cyber? Well, it's now the precedent. The precedent is you can take these people out, which is good. Israel's been under attack for the last 24, almost 36 hours. Over 800 rockets have been sent from Gaza into Israeli civilian population. 5 Israelis have been injured, over 100 killed. Hamas is using their citizens as human shields. Based on the numbers I saw right before this broadcast, 32 dead terrorists, another 20 some odd civilians that have been victimized in the process. So not an easy time for our friends over in Israel and the folks over there in Gaza, the citizens who are being held captive by a terrorist organization known as Hamas. So keep those people in your prayers, and let's hope for calmer days for our friends over in Israel. And we'll do that. Matt says a huge Wi-Fi frac fixed in May updates. Wi-Fi devices since 1997 susceptible. And David says, good morning, James. Great to see you this morning, man. Great to see you too as well, folks. My ceremonial cup of coffee. I hope you will join me for whatever your favorite morning drink is, or if you're JJ, for example, she's in Australia. It's evening now. It's nighttime. So whatever you take to go to sleep, cheers. So let's start off with our first story of the day here. SAP patches the high-severity flaws in Business One and NetWeaver products. The first of the updated hot news notes, which has a CVSS score of 10, deals with security updates for Chromium delivered with SAP Business Client at version 90.0.4430.9 or 3. This Chromium update fixes 63 security holes and featuring in the other corner, featuring a CVSS score of 9 or 0.9. The other two updated notes patch a remote code execution vulnerability in source rules of SAP Commerce and a code injection issue in Business Warehouse and BW4 HANA, respectively. So if you're on SAP, please, 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 please patch today. It's important. Get it done. If you haven't done it yesterday, this could lead to the disclosure of payroll data and payroll fraud, which is something we don't often talk about here. And we don't hear a lot of stories about it, but payroll fraud is a real thing. I've been and heard from many of my peers who've been impacted by payroll fraud. So keep that in mind. Adobe's Patch Tuesday came out yesterday, and they're warned that a gaping security hole in one of the most widely deployed software products has been exploited in the wild in limited attacks targeting Adobe Reader users on Windows. The Adobe confirmation of the zero-day attack was buried in a security bulletin that documents at least 11 security vulnerabilities that affect Adobe Acrobat and Reader on both Windows and Mac OS. The updates address multiple critical and important vulnerabilities. Successful exploitation could lead to arbitrary code execution in the context of the current user. Adobe's Acrobat Reader is widely used freeware to view, create, fill, print, and format files in PDF. The software has long been a rich target for our adversaries. The under-attack flaw, which is CVE 2021-28550, is described as a use after free memory corruption issue that was discovered and reported anonymously to Adobe. The company did not provide details on that. We've got some fun comments going in. I'll bring those up here in just a moment. Microsoft's Patch Tuesday was yesterday as well. 55 vulnerabilities, 4 critical, 3 publicly known for the May 2021 Microsoft Patch Tuesday. Windows network administrators, get ready to patch. Here we go. 4 of the 55 flaws are rated critical. The company's highest severity rating. These include CVE 2021-31166 and HTTP protocol stack remote code execution, CVE 2021-28476, a Hyper-V remote code execution, CVE 2021-311-904, an OLE automation remote code execution, and CVE 2021-26419, a scripting engine memory corruption vulnerability. Windows administrators should prioritize CVE 2021-31204, a .NET Core and Visual Studio, CVE 2021-31200, Common Utilities RCE, and CVE 2021-31207, the Exchange server, with more updates for Microsoft Exchange today. So make sure to get those patched up. Adobe also warned that Windows users, as I just said a minute ago, are exposed to an active zero-day going on in Adobe Reader. So here's some mitigation around Adobe. 1, increase controls. 2, if you're using Office 365, any Adobe document that comes through is scanned if you just have like the upgraded Adobe Office 365 or the E3, E5 program where you've got the safe attachment feature enabled. If you do that, then you're likely going to stop any malicious documents from coming into your environment. I would disable Adobe Reader until you're able to patch everything in all the Adobe devices and make sure that that stuff is all taken care of. You'll see more on the Adobe stuff in the next few days as we get more and more about it. Let's move on to something outside of Patch Tuesday. The German regulator on Tuesday slapped Facebook with a 3-month ban on collecting user data from WhatsApp accounts and referred the case to the EU watchdog, citing concerns about election integrity. The Hamburg Commissioner for Data Protection and Freedom of Information sent the order to the social network, which owns the popular messaging service. Hamburg has jurisdiction because Facebook's German branch is based in the city. The tech giant informed WhatsApp users earlier this year that they had to consent to a new data use policy to continue using the service. And on Monday on this show, I brought up the fact that if you don't comply with this, then they're going to give you limited features, and eventually they won't delete you, but they'll just you won't be able to use WhatsApp for all of its features. This is a great move by Germany, by the way. Like, a brilliant move. I wish we had something similar like this to the state to keep these guys in check. I can tell you that in Europe and in the Middle East and in Africa, WhatsApp is a lifeline. Like, we use iMessage a lot in the States because we've had unlimited texting for like 10 years now. But in those places, unlimited texting wasn't even a thing, and voice calls still cost a lot of money because of the maturity and the cost of the networks there. So they use WhatsApp for everything. And next month, the first month of June, I'll have 5 CISOs from Africa talking about WhatsApp and talking a little bit about how hard it is to do security in Africa, and also some of the great things and the resiliency that they have because of the limited resources that exist within the continent. So that's going to be live on June 4th. So you'll want to tune in to that. It's going to be early in the morning because we're doing it at 12:30, I believe, GMT +2, which is 5:30 in the morning here in the States. But it might be worth getting up early or just making sure you catch it on YouTube later after the fact. Some fun comments here we'll get to in just a moment. Well, Matt Lee, front and center. Dictator Spencer, I presume, a very funny emoji. And David Brin says, well, it's great that all these companies are trying to keep on top of patching and updates as quickly as the exploits come out. It makes me want to minimize my device usage to a single device, drowning in updates that aren't happening during scheduled downtime. Yeah, that's a great way. I mean, David, I use multiple devices. I'll share my patching strategy. On days like Patch Tuesday, I come in, I run updates on one device, use the other one for limited functionality. Once that device is done updating, I move to the other one, patch it, and then both of my devices are done during the middle of the day, and I don't have to really worry about it much. We do automatic updates internally within our organization for Microsoft and Adobe. We don't use SAP, so that's not really a big deal for us, but we do use obviously Microsoft and Adobe, and we do automatic updates on people's devices. In fact, they can't log in until the updates are done is our policy. When it comes to that kind of stuff, for the more complex patching stuff, we do have a patch management program in place, and we can do a whole show just on patch management if people would like. Our final story for today is the U.S. intel agencies warn about 5G network weakness. According to a report given out by the NSA with ODNI, DHS, and CISA, the inadequate implementation of telecom standards, supply chain threats, and weakness in systems architecture could pose a major cybersecurity risk to 5G networks, potentially making them a lucrative target for cybercriminals and nation-state adversaries to exploit for valuable intelligence. As new 5G policies and standards are released, according to the report, there remains the potential for threats that impact the end user. For example, nation-states may attempt to exert undue influence on standards that benefit their proprietary technology and limit customers' choices to use other equipment on software. So while technology in one aspect opened up our lives, we're now seeing that the monopoly of the supply chain is really limiting the functionality and the choices that consumers have to make. And essentially, we opened this market, and now people are trying to close the walls in on the users. We see that with Facebook and WhatsApp, kind of the reverse ransomware that Facebook is doing now that Germany halted just a moment ago in the story I just brought up. And now we're seeing this warning by the NSA, ODNI, and CISA, which now they say the second area of concern is the supply chain. Components that are procured from third-party vendors, suppliers, and service providers could either be counterfeit or compromised with security flaws and malware injected during the early development process. Something we've all been screaming about in the industry for several years, but now it's great to see this really trickle down to the organizations. And we do need to come up with some sort of standard for 5G and deploying new technology. I realize that we live in a capitalistic society where the first one to come stands to probably earn the most from something. But I'd like to go to the competition between BMW and Mercedes, and some of you may disagree with me on this or not. BMW always seems to be like they're adopting technology quicker in their cars. But if you've ever owned a BMW or know someone who's owned a BMW, they spend more time with the rental because the car's at the shop than they do with the actual car they own. On the other hand, Mercedes, luxury brand, and what Mercedes does is they look at this technology and they study it for a year or two. They test it. They make sure it works seamless within their environment, and only then do they put it in their vehicles. And that's why you don't see, and that's why Mercedes owners are very, very loyal to the Benz brand because of that. So they're not always the first ones to go, but they definitely understand the technology and study it. And by the way, this was something that was the difference between Verizon and AT&T here in the US from a network compatibility over a period of time. And what made Verizon what it is today was their attention to detail and not rushing to launch new technology without properly testing it, or not rushing to launch new devices on their network without testing them and making sure that the experience was done well. Lastly, the weakness in the 5G architecture itself could be used as a jumping off point to execute a variety of attacks. Chief among them involves the need to support 4G legacy communication infrastructure, which comes with its own set of inherent shortcomings that could be exploited by malicious actor. The study, which was published by Adaptive Mobile in March 2021, found that the security flaws in the slicing model could be repurposed to allow data access and carry out denial of service attacks between different network slices on mobile operators' 5G networks. So definitely something to keep in mind is if you're buying these 5G devices going on 5G network, just understand there's going to be more to that. Matt says here, did everyone see that CIS controls added service providers in 8.0? They did. I did actually see that, and that is epic. Thank you so much for sharing that, Matt. Folks, that's it for our show today. And like I said when we kicked off the show, and I'm getting more information here on my screen, Israel is now actively targeting Hamas's cybersecurity unit with actual missiles and have taken down several of their buildings and cybersecurity infrastructure. Even though there's no known cyber attacks that have been published that Hamas is using, it apparently is a detractor for Israel in the battles that are going on there. It's very, very interesting. So make sure to go check that out as well. I'll be posting more on that later today on my LinkedIn page. At 8 p.m. tonight, the Tech Town Square with Eddie. Joining us is former KGB agent Jack Barsky. We're going to be talking about Russia. We're going to talk about the Colonial Pipeline, a lot of great things. Make sure to tune in tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern, right here on my LinkedIn page, on the CyberHub podcast, YouTube, and Facebook page. Tune into this conversation. You don't want to miss it. Jack will be live with us, and we'll have an awesome, awesome conversation. Until then, folks, thank you so much for watching today's show. Thank you for all your participation. Thank you for listening. Please make sure to subscribe. Please make sure to check out the awesome companies that financially back our podcast to keep it coming to you free of charge. And finally, enjoy the rest of your day. It's hump day. Friday's just around the corner. And most importantly, folks, stay cyber safe. Cheers.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.